My name is Rebecca. So again, thank you for having me. I'm just going to kind of kick off with a few basic things. One, I have a home group. It is the 6 o'clock happy hour group here in Augusta, Georgia. Real quick, I live in North Augusta, South Carolina, but I work in Augusta, Georgia. Families in Georgia, it's about a 15-minute drive right across the bridge. So I don't want to confuse anyone. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I have the privilege of sponsoring women in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is November the 14th, 2011. So those are some of the general things that I always like to kick off with. And also with that said, there's a reading that I always do before any of my talks. And it means so much to me. When I was in early sobriety, and for those that's in early sobriety, that's generally not fun. At least it was not fun for me. It was actually very difficult, but it's been extremely rewarding. And when I came into the rooms, my first sponsor sponsored me for about 8.5 years. And there's a few things that were covered. And the first thing that was covered was open the first page of the big book. So I opened the first page of the big book where the writing is. But my sponsor had me said, no, this is the first page of the big book. It's blank. That's what you know about recovery. The only thing you know how to do is drink. My first sponsor was an old timer and very strict, I guess is the word, old school. It's what I needed. And that is why I chose that sponsor for that time period. I will share a little bit later about why that changed. And so of course it was suggested I read the first 164 pages of the big book. I go to meetings and I work the 12 steps of recovery and get fully involved. And I did read a lot of the 164 pages, but I also really like the stories in the back. And one of the stories really hit home for me. And in that is about 2 paragraphs that I'm just going to share with you. That's on the bottom of page 315. And the story title is My Chance to Live. At the bottom of page 315, it says, if everyone who needed AA showed up, we would be bursting at the seams. Unfortunately, most never make it to the door. I believe I was one of the lucky ones, not just because I found this program at such a young age. I feel fortunate that I found AA at all. My approach to drinking brought me to the jumping off place described in the big book much faster than I could have imagined. I'm convinced if I continued on my course, I wouldn't have survived much longer. It was my time, my chance to live, and I took it. If there still had been joy in my drinking or even a remote chance of joy returning, I wouldn't have stopped drinking when I did. And that is the fact. If there still would have been joy in my drinking, I would not have stopped. And in some ways, in all ways, actually, God did for me what I could not do for myself. I came from a very good childhood. At no point have I ever been able to look back and say, well, if my parents would have done X, Y, and Z, or my childhood wasn't good. There was no mental abuse. There was no emotional abuse. There was no sexual abuse. There was no physical abuse. My dad actually was a pastor. My mother was a homemaker. My dad would work extra jobs just so we could have some of the extra benefits or some of the extras, I guess is the word in life. I always had everything that I needed. And then sometimes I got things that I wanted. I never went without. I will say my dad was extremely strict. By the age of 15, you wore a knee-length skirt. You did not wear blue jeans. You were a lady. That's just the way that it was. My mother, the nurturing type, very sweet. I love her. I always say that, you know, today in life, if I can be half the wife my mom is or half the mother that she has been, then I'll be doing a pretty good job. I had a great example. My dad, more or less on the actions speak louder than words, Rebecca Gale. My whole family calls me Rebecca Gale, named after my youngest sister, my mom's youngest sister, Rebecca, and her oldest sister, Gail. So it's Rebecca Gale or RG for short. So if you hear me refer to that, you know why. And it's interesting because when I walked back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and decided that it was time to get sober, I thought about that. You know, actions speak louder than words. And in the big book, there's a chapter that literally says into action. It doesn't say into thinking. And my thinking got me here. My best thinking got me to the rooms of recovery. So I needed someone to help me a little bit. And so I had a good childhood. I have a brother. He's 6.5 years older than me. He's like my rock. We chose very different paths in life. You know, by the age of 23, he was a homeowner and was working for himself as an electrician. And by the age of 23, my life had fallen to pieces and I was on a brand new beginning with recovery. Sometimes I hear speakers say that they felt very different early on, and that wasn't my case. I didn't feel different early on. I felt like an average kid. I was extremely shy in my earlier years, but once I warmed up, I was just fine. It wasn't until later that some of those insecurities came. So when I went to, so anyway, elementary school, middle school was a breeze. By the time I got to high school, you know, I had my first boyfriend and all that good jazz, and thought that he was the one forever, and that wasn't the case. By my 10th grade year, that didn't work out. I remember it, my mom, you know, trying to comfort me, and, you know, my dad tried to buy me something, which, you know, that doesn't work. So anyways, I started venturing out. I had always been an AB honor roll student. I participated in church events. I did all the things for the most part up until about the age of 14 or 15 that would be expected of me. And so the end of my sophomore year, friends' parents were out of town. And so we lived, the high school we went to was right across the street from a parents' neighborhood, and none of us drove at that time. And so we decided to walk across to her parents' house, me and 2 other girlfriends, and to hang out. And I had this bright idea that, hey, maybe we should raid that mini bar that your parents have. So we broke into it, and not knowing much about alcohol at all, we lined up the shot glasses, pulled out the Bacardi 151, and started going at it. Needless to say, there's a reason there is a filter on that. They all drank, but they stopped, and I continued to drink. From the first time that I drank to the last time that I drank, I was a blackout drinker. I liked the way that it made me feel when I put it in my body. Number one, I was no longer shy. And the reality was, at that point, I didn't know it, but I was just an alcoholic, ready for it. It does run on both sides of my family. My parents are not alcoholics, but my grandfather was, and some on my mom's side. So anyways, I went on that summer before my junior year. I started partying pretty hard, and I was introduced to other substances. I'm going to go ahead and just say this off rip. Substances are a part of my story. However, out of the respect for the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, I will keep that at a minimum, but I can't change my story. It is just the way that it is. Alcohol and alcohol alone brought me back to the rooms in November of 2011. For me, I cannot replace one thing for the other. Either I'm all in or I'm all out. That's just the way that it is. And so the summer before my junior year, during that partying, an event occurred in my life as a young woman, and it changed my life greatly. And I didn't talk about that for a very long time, but I remember going back to my junior year of high school, and I remember walking down the main hallway, and life just seemed everything seemed overwhelming. all the insecurities, the feeling different that I hear in other people's stories were very much there and present. By the time I reached the first semester of my junior year, I was failing 6 out of my 7 classes. I pretty much no longer went to classes anymore. I made the great grand decision to drop out of high school. And ironically, my parents agreed. I went to a technical school here in Augusta. They told me to get a trade, to do something different, than what I was doing. And of course, I did not follow through with anything. I met some more people and I partied a little harder. I was arrested around this time too for shoplifting. And like I said, my dad's pretty strict. I remember when I was arrested, the friend that I was arrested with got out within about 3 hours, and it was midnight, and the jailer forced me to call home because at 17 you were taken to regular jail, but the only person that could bond you out were your legal guardians. And I told the jailer that I was better off sitting tight than calling home. But of course, he made me. My parents, of course, said you can't come home. You do the crime, you do the time. I ended up staying there close to a week. It was the weekend and holidays fell into play. And that was all right. It's funny because I never stole from a store again, but I would steal from your medicine cabinet or whatever else I had to do whatever I needed to do for myself. It was interesting. My mom picked me up from the jail and she said, we picked up your car from the mall so it wouldn't get towed, Rebecca Gale. You have $300 of cash in the middle console. Why didn't you bring it in? And I had no words for her. And the simple fact was the isms were there long before my drinking took off. And almost a sense of, could I get away with it? And that's just the truth. It doesn't sound good, but it's the truth. And so by the age of 17, this had occurred. Mom was a great snoop. Early morning, I get a knock on my door and my dad says, pack your bags. I can't condone the lifestyle you're living. You need to leave home. And if you ever want to get help, you let us know. And that was that. And I went home, or I left home, stayed with a friend. Within a few months, I got pulled for a DUI. Somehow was fortunate enough to get let out of that at 3:30 in the morning on a Thursday. The lady that I was staying with said, hey, Rebecca, pack your bags and get out. Two other family members, actually my brother, who I affected the most with my alcoholism, took me in, but also one other family member, my cousin and her husband actually took me in twice from about the age of 17 to 20. And both times I were asked to leave because of drugs and alcohol. Packing my bags and leaving became a routine in my life before the age of 20. I had my first job at Dairy Queen for 1.5 years. At the age of 15, I got upset, went to Dippin' Dots for 9 months. And after that, I counted 12 more jobs until the age of 20. You see, I could get a job, but I couldn't keep it. They wanted me to show up on time. They wanted me to show up on the right day. A lot of my substance use did not allow me to know what day it was. So there's that. And, I could get a job, but man, I just couldn't keep it. And, at this point, up until the age of 20, I buried a few friends to, overdose, drinking and driving. And by the age of 20, I was 86 pounds and I didn't have a job. And I remember I was sitting in a garage. That's where I hung out, was places like garages. And I was sitting in a garage and there was a lady by the name of Alicia, and she sat directly across from me. It was her mom's house, but it was her garage. We were not allowed in the house, but we could stay in the garage. And I remember looking at her, and her liver was failing, her kidneys were failing. And I just thought, she was 36 and I was 20. And I thought, man, like, that's pretty much going to be me. Only I don't even have a parent's garage. The locks were changed. So I think it was a God thing. Actually, I know it was a God thing, like that moment of clarity that you hear about. So I picked up the phone. I told my mother I needed help. Shortly thereafter, I thought that I was going to go to a treatment facility that was anywhere from 30, 60, 90 days tops. And I ended up, at the Bridges of Hope. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's down South Georgia. It is a very strict 12-step based treatment facility. And it's also very strict. Very strict. Meaning, if you don't show up to count on time, or if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you write, half the big book in your room. You don't come out for weekend events. You go sticking in the woods. I did that a lot. If there was any way that I could buck, I bucked when I got there. I knew that I needed help. I just wasn't ready. I knew that substances were a problem in my life, and it was clear to me and others around me. And my brother said, this is it. From the age of 17 to 20, the main place that I would frequent or call home was my brother's home. And my brother didn't say much, and he doesn't say much. We're the opposite. But when he does, it means something. And, he informed me that you're going to go to treatment, you're going to complete treatment, or I'm not taking you in. Like, this is it. He even threw out my cell phone on the way, told me I wouldn't be needing it. And I didn't need it. Anyway, so long story short, when I left treatment, they told me to get a sponsor, work the 12 steps, go to 90 meetings in 90 days, do not get involved in a relationship, pray, read your big book, all the things. And I moved back in with my brother when I left. He provided me with, a phone. He referred me to a lady at a hotel for a job interview. And she asked for my criminal, which had theft on it. And she said, I don't hire thieves in my hotel. And I begged her for a job. And so she let me wash dishes there. And I started washing dishes, and that's what I did in early sobriety, fresh out the Bridges. And, eventually I went from dishwashing to running a full banquet department. And I made pretty decent money. In less than 3 months out of treatment, I got a boyfriend. I never got a sponsor. I never worked the 12 steps. I most certainly did not do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I definitely wasn't praying. And guess what happened? I picked up a drink. Who would have thought, right? And kind of from there, for the next couple years, I bounced in and out the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I replaced all of my substance use with my drinking. If you were to ask me today what my drink or drug of choice is, I would have to say it's whiskey. It was always there. It was always available. Drinking is socially accepted. I'm not socially accepted when I drink, though. So there's that fun fact. So I began to drink, and I would tell myself when I didn't have major events on the weekends, I would drink then. The weekends turned into Monday, Monday turned into Tuesday. For the next couple years, I thought that if I kept up appearances, that I could drink when and where I wanted to drink and how much I wanted to drink. I had my own place. I had my own vehicle. I paid all my bills. I was fully self-supporting. I wasn't bouncing job to job. I was growing within the company. And I thought that I had it all together. And so within 6 months of that first relapse after the Bridges, I found myself in and out, in and out. You know, it's pretty bad when pretty much your home group stops clapping because you continue to pick up white chips. I never put more than 34 days of dry time together before I sobered up in 2011. And dry time for me was not putting any drink or drug in my body, but being absolutely miserable and not working a program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know, I knew deep in my heart, like, that's why I kept coming back. Like, I needed the rooms. I needed my boss to get off my back. You know, I needed my brother to maybe not ask any questions. I needed to be able to come into work without reeking of booze and my boss saying, hey, you're a poor example to your employees. Go home, shower, try again. I really needed that kind of stuff to stop, though. And so what would happen is I would go in for 20, 30 days, try to get my finances back in order, the boss off my back, maybe save the boyfriend I had going on, and all would be well. And eventually, you know, my disease just caught up with me. My last relapse, if you want to call it that, my last time out, it went from 6 months to 4 days. Like 6 months, 4 months, 3 months I was out too. It was like shorter and shorter and shorter. And what that tells me today that I didn't see then was that the disease is progressive, that I am a true alcoholic and that it will never get better for me. My drinking will not, you know, I will not be able to drink like a lady. It will only increase. And it did quickly. You know, it was interesting because the last 6 months of my drinking, when I didn't have events, I would pick up serving tables at a sister property. It was actually the DoubleTree, and I'd work the Friday night dinner and the Sunday morning brunch, and that put a couple $100 in my pocket, just so I could support my drinking. And you know, it's interesting because in sobriety, I've never had to have 2 jobs. When I drank, I sure did. So there's that. So yeah, my last time was 4 days out. And what happened was, it was a Sunday, and I put 27 days of dry time together, and I went out for a few days. And on November the 13th, 2011, it was a Sunday evening. A former boyfriend of mine contacted me through social media and asked me if I wanted to meet for drinks at a local bar here in Augusta. And so I agreed to do so. I can remember while I was on the way to the bar, it had never happened to me before, but something told me not to drink that night and maybe go to my 8:30 p.m. home, you know, what I considered a home group meeting at that time. And I didn't, you know, I didn't follow that voice. I follow my alcoholism because that's what I know. And so we met at a local bar and we drank, and we moved from beer to tequila quickly. He left that bar and he was on a motorcycle. And when he left, he was traveling down Skinner Mill Road here in Augusta in the direction of Boy Scout Road. He went around a corner. He crossed lanes. He hit a vehicle head on. His motorcycle flew against the retaining wall of I-20. His body went the opposite direction. I came through, I ran over him, and I continued to drag him another 30 feet. I can remember the following morning when I came to, I went outside to smoke a cigarette. And when I stepped on my front porch, my car, where the apartment place I lived in was like right in front of my door almost, and the bottom fog light on the right side of my driver's vehicle, the bottom fog light was completely missing. And I can remember approaching my vehicle, and there was blood splatter all the way down from the front to the back end of my car. And you know, I even proceeded to get on my hands and knees and look underneath my car, and we'll leave it at that. But I don't know how long I was standing there, but at some point I made it back into my apartment, and there was a cafe sign in my kitchen, and I remember it clear. And I can kind of just remember stooping down underneath the the cafe sign in a fetal position, and I physically began to rip the hair out of my head. And I attempted to put all my pieces together. And so what do? I call Big Brother. Big Brother will know what to do. And I called my brother, and he referred me to a family friend of ours that said maybe, you know, he can help you. I can't help you, Rebecca Gill. I can't help you anymore. So I called that family friend, and Sunday the accident happened. Monday I put together my pieces. Tuesday I made a written statement to the police. I informed my employer, etc. Friday I was arrested for a felony hit and run. Cause of death could not be determined because both impacts were so severe. The gentleman that passed away in that accident left behind a 3-year-old daughter, as well as a sister in high school and 2 loving parents. When I got booked in on that Friday evening, I had not ate in days or showered. I had also not drank. I remember being booked in, and there was a trash can to my right, and then, you know, any water fluid that I put in my body just, you know, came up. I hate to be graphic, but it's just where I was at. And anyway, I got booked in. There was no bond because there was a death. And on Saturday, I was sitting in the block with population, as you call it, and the whole block went quiet, and everyone was looking at me. And my face was on every news channel in Augusta. And pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization on every level. My actions no longer just affected me. It affected everybody else around me. And I knew it. And, you know, you hear it a lot, but for me, it was true. And that evening, I got on my knees, and for the first time in years, I asked God to help me, and I asked God to guide me. And I said, whatever your will for me, just help me stay sober through the process. And at the end of my prayer, a key part was I said, thy will be done, not mine. I grew up in a good background. I knew what that statement meant. I knew how powerful it was. And for a long time, I never said it, but I said it and I meant it. And I guess it meant something because I'm sitting here with y'all today. And eventually, around a week or so, I was released. I was considered a flight risk. So I was underneath the care of a particular family member's supervision so that I would not leave. I went to 2 places when I left jail. In one, I went to my employer, and she said, the Doubletrees fired you. Do not go back. A lady by the name of Lisa, who I never met, walked into her office and said, Rebecca, this is Lisa. You're going to train her to run that banquet department. You're going back to the dish pit. And I said, yes, ma'am. And so that's what I did. And my dad told me, we'd send you back to the Bridges of Hope, Rebecca Gill, but now we have attorney fees. My parents at that point in my life really stepped in the best way that they could. And the second place I went was the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was when I got that old timer, mean sponsor. And that's when I began to put pen to paper. And that's when they said, do this, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you have me to do. Because they said that if I worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the promises that they read in every meeting would come true. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about, self-pity and all these things would leave me. man, like I would often daydream in meetings, like if a quarter of these promises would come true for me, I'll take it. But man, so much more has come true than I could have ever imagined. And I'm grateful for that. And so I just stayed the course, man, like whatever the older people told me to do. You know, I was working roughly about a step a month. And it was interesting. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, there's promises behind a lot of the steps. And the fifth step promises, it talks about, you know, we'll be able to look the world in the eye again. And for months, when I went to meetings, I wore a ball cap and I looked at my feet when I walked. If you would have said, hey, Rebecca, how much self-esteem did you have when you got sober? I would have said, what self-esteem? I did drink strawberry Ensure for months. I hated me. And that's a strong statement to say, but I really hated me. But I was also told that I wasn't a bad person, that I was a sick person, and sick people can get better too. So that gave me a lot of hope. And it was interesting because I had worked a fifth step with the sponsor, and a couple days later, another old timer, Gilbert, had saw me at a meeting, and he said, hey, Rebecca, where's that ball cap? And I just kind of looked at him, and I not even had realized that the ball cap had come off, and I didn't have to look at my feet when I walked anymore. I wasn't by any means out of the weeds, but I was making progress. As far as you know, court, I like to kind of go over that. And what ended up playing out was I picked up a 6-month chip. The day that I picked up the 6-month chip, my brother informed me that him and his wife, he visited me on his 1-year wedding anniversary in jail, may I add. So 6 months later, he informs me that they're having a baby. And her name is Cecilia. And at that point, I knew 3 days later I would go to court. And I wondered if I would be a part of her life, because my lawyer was straight up and said, if a judge decides on it, you got a 50-50 shot, you won't do any time. If it goes to a jury, you're SOL. And I said, okay. And when I walked in the courtroom that day, you know, I just said a prayer and did as my attorney told me to do. But something I always like to share in my story, I remember standing up before the judge, and the DA was on one side and they were reading all the graphic details. And I can remember just breaking down, and I felt like a hand on my shoulder. And when I looked to the side, you know, my mother had stepped forward with me. And then the judge says, will the victim's parents please step forward? I was no longer the victim in any scenario of my life. You know, there are things that have happened in my life that may have not been unfair, or people may have harmed me, but make no mistake, I'm not a victim. I am a survivor of that today. And I am a survivor of the disease of alcoholism each day that I stay sober. We are a survivor of that each day that we stay clean and sober. And that always rang with me, and I've always remembered it. Long story short, you know, the judge even said, you know, if I put Rebecca away, it won't bring your son back. And there were factors to consider in all areas. You know, he had played his part, but I had played my part, and we were both under the influence. So part of my sentencing was to go out to high schools and give talks on the dangers of drinking and driving. He sentenced me to 200 hours. It took me 4 years and 11 months to complete. I never cheated an hour because I never wanted to cheat a student. By my second or third talk, I knew exactly, you know, why he had put me there. And I don't mean that the judge put me there or the lawyer helped me get there. I mean, God put me there. And he put me there for a reason. And he put me there for a purpose. I can't count over almost the next 5 years how many times after every single talk a student would come to me about something. And I would have the opportunity to talk with them and walk them to a guidance counselor or a favorite coach or a teacher. And so there's kind of that part of that. Of course, there was intense, felony probation, and they were always checking up on me, and, every fines and everything else goes with that. So that was a little bit about that. I want to kind of talk about the 12 steps, some of the good things that's happened in my life and some of the not so good things that's happened in my life, and how with the program and God, I'm still here today. And let's talk about the 12 steps really quick. So I actually sometimes like to go over them backwards. And my sponsor says you can work the 12 steps in order, or you can work them backwards to a drink or a drug. And if I start at 12, I stopped working with other alcoholics. I don't need to go to meetings. I think I'm good. 11, I stopped prayer and meditation. I'll get to it later. 10, I stopped taking inventory. Why do I stop taking inventory? Because I probably owe someone an amends. Now I'm at 9 and 8. Why do I owe someone an amends? Well, because I've probably acted out of a defect of character in 6 and 7, or I've been harmed, or there's fear, or there's something going on that I'm not addressing. And then I'm back at 5 and 4. Resentments, fears, harm done to others. But I'm not looking at it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at it because I think I've been done wrong. Now I'm at 3. Now I take my will back because, God, you didn't do anything for me. Then I'm at 2. Now I'm pushing insanity. There's no hope. And then I'm at 1. And before you know it, I drink. And I only say that like that because if it wasn't for steps 1, 2, and 3, which are my foundation steps in recovery, make no mistake that every day that I wake up, nothing's changed. I'm still an alcoholic. I still have a problem with substances. I can't do it successfully. I will run my life into the ground, and I will run everyone else's around and take them with me while I'm at it. That's what I will do. If I run my life, it doesn't go well. But from experience, if God runs my life, it does go pretty well. And, them are my foundation steps. 4 through 9's the meat of the program. It's where I gotta look at me. I gotta work on me. And then I gotta step out of that. And I gotta start cleaning up, my side of the street, in 9. And 10, 11, and 12 is maintaining them. We can call them maintenance steps, or we can call them growth steps because I learned from them. So some of the hard things that I've experienced, and which is what will happen is if I'm not working and doing what I'm supposed to do in a program, hard things can set me back very quickly. And, about a month before my 2-year celebration, I got a call leaving my meeting in the evening of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a deputy, and he verified who I was, and he asked me to come to my parents' home. Of course, man, I had that sinking gut feeling, and so I went out there, and, he informed me that my dad had taken his own life that night. And I can remember standing there like, almost paralyzed. And my brother was there, and he was crying. It was the second time I ever saw him cry. He cried when he dropped me off at treatment. He cried when my dad died. I saw my mother. They've been married 2 months shy of 33 years. And the day before, on a Friday, I decided out the blue to go visit them. And I put on the knee-length skirt And when I entered my house, I respected my dad's household, and I was a lady. And I went in that Friday and I had lunch with them and I visited them. And the last thing that I ever said to my dad was, "Hey, I love you." That's what the program does. So when he was no longer there the next day, to say that I wanted to change the way that I felt would be an understatement. But I had two options. I could change the way that I felt, or because recovery gives me options and choices, I could throw myself into the rooms of recovery. I could reach out to my sponsor. I could go to a meeting and I could share raw, like where I was at. And I still have to do that today. It doesn't matter what I got going on. It doesn't matter if I have a sponsee sitting in the room. Oh, well, what will they think of me with, multiple years under my belt? I'm an alcoholic. I qualify. Life shows up. I got to share about really where I'm at in a meeting, or I will go back out, because if I don't check in, then I will check out. See, that's it. And so, man, I just threw myself in, like I didn't know what else to do. And it was really then that I learned that, like, when I share in meetings, that although people don't understand the way that I feel, they can relate to how I feel, and they can help me through whatever it is that I'm going through. And the first word in any 12-step group is we. We admitted we were powerless. I don't have to do this alone. Loneliness is a choice. And that's what I did. And, I was married at 3 years. I was divorced at 5 years. I didn't have to drink or drug over it. I could use the program. Today I have a wonderful husband. And my husband is also in recovery. And October the 18th of this month has been 3 years that we have been married. And when I was going from year 8 to 9, this was after we married, he fell off the wagon, and he fell off the wagon hard. And because this is a treatment facility in here too, I will say that, his drug of choice is crack cocaine, and it's not a pretty thing. And so when he fell off the wagon, it was like the rug was swept out from under me. It was like every bit of information that I knew about recovery, the fact that I work in a treatment facility, or any of these things went out the window. I reacted as a fearful wife. I did not respond as someone in recovery. And the pain that comes with that, in so many areas, was almost unbearable. It was, it's like hard to function at work, or, trust is broken. And I began to work the 12 steps backwards. But I knew it. And I did something about it. And one of the things that I did about that was, now I'm a member of Al-Anon. And I really love that program, And, that program also saved my sanity, my sobriety, and my marriage. And, today I have double the solutions in life. I don't have to work 2 programs. I get to have 2 programs. And I have another amazing set of friends. And so that's been some really, difficult things. I've buried sponsees. I've buried a roommate. Like, just because I get sober doesn't mean life's rainbows and butterflies. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. But I'll tell you some really cool stuff that's happened. That niece that I talked about, that I didn't know if I was going to get to see, she'll be 10 years old on January the 4th. She's never seen me under the influence. I've never missed a birthday. I don't care how much is in the account. I've never missed a birthday. And that's also an amends and a living amends, back to my brother and my family. When my dad passed, I had the privilege of doing the eulogy at his funeral. and was the support for my family when they needed me instead of being a path of destruction. You know, I obviously am not a dishwasher anymore. And, you know, somehow I managed to get an extra like waiting shift or something, and somehow the rent was paid like that first year. You know, like you walk back and forth, rain or shine, you know, all that. And eventually, like, you know, that job promotion came, and then another one came, and then you know, about 4.5 years ago, I realized I don't want to keep moving up. I want to do something different. And I ended up taking a position at a treatment facility here in Augusta, Georgia. And went in on faith. Like, to be honest, I took a pretty hefty pay cut, and but I was, you know, able to do that at the time. And I went in as a, you know, behavior tech, and then eventually did a transition coordinator for the last 2.5 years. And you know, the last 2 weeks stepped into a brand new position. So you know, if I'm willing to do the work, then God will always provide for me. You know, also anyone who has family who is struggling with the disease, or friends that are still out there. You know, if I can give my life and my care over to God, then why can't I give the person I love over to them? Why can't I know that they're going to protect and care for them? And I can just be an you know, someone who encourages and loves them no matter where they're at. So there's that too. It was really cool. So I got to go to Hawaii last year for our 2nd anniversary. So we kind of kept it low key this year. I've been skydiving 3 times. I get to do really cool stuff in sobriety. I have a wonderful relationship with my mom. She's one of my best friends. And what's really cool is this. So the gentleman that passed away in that accident in 2011 that left behind that daughter, her mom is one of my best friends. They invite me to her birthday parties for the last few years now. I get to be a part of. An old timer, George C., says, if you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will witness miracles and you will be a part of miracles. And man, I didn't believe that when I came in, but I do. And so if you're new and you're struggling, like, keep persevering. Don't give up. They say don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle happens. Just don't give up, period. You know, like, whatever you're going through will pass. Or if it's tough, like, you will grow from it and you will learn from it and you will be able to help others. You know, those high school talks of several months after my dad's death, I implemented self-harm. You know, I'm a survivor of a suicide victim. I'm not a victim. It's all about perspective. The program and the God of my understanding, you know, gives me perspective. So like the last few years, you know, me and that first sponsor were super tight. But I have also, you know, have a new sponsor the last couple of years. And, you know, she's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but she's also kind of a black belt in Al-Anon. So I have a 2-for-1 there. And that's just kind of how, you know, life is. And it's really good. I want to read like a paragraph and then I'll wrap it up if that's okay. Let's see. Okay. And this is on page 318 in the big book. And it says, life is not heaped monetary riches upon my head, nor have I achieved fame in the eyes of the world. My blessings cannot be measured in those terms. No amount of money or fame could equal what has been given to me. Today, I can walk down the street anywhere without the fear of meeting someone I've harmed. Today, my thoughts are not consumed for the craving for the next drink or the regret for the damage that I did on my last drunk. Today, I reside among the living, no better, no worse than any of God's other children. Today, I look in the mirror when putting on my makeup and I smile rather than shy away from looking myself in the eye. Today, I fit in my skin. I am at peace with myself and the world around me. Ashton, thank you so much for asking me to share my story. Thank you.